Hi, everybody.
Hi,
We're back. We're back.
we're back. I know, I'm here.
You know what?
We're back.
um, we're so excited that we got such great feedback from the last, our first, and the last episode that we did. We're so excited that we got such great comments and feedback, and just want to say thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
So, welcome back to
Our conversations.
our conversation. And we are glad to be back and with a whole other topic and
Yes,
conversation that we're getting ready to have right now.
and a very controversial
Okay.
topic
So
at
we
that.
just kind of wanted to give a little feedback and another introduction for those who are new watching it. This is Our Conversations, and I'm Tia Marche Sanford.
And I'm Lawan Johnson.
And we're so excited that you are tuning in and listening to us and our conversation about faith, love, our walk with Christ, and some other stuff that we think about. So just want to let's talk about just the feedback that we got from our last podcast. You want to?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool that it worked out so well. I think it worked out really well. So now I just kind of have this expectation that it's just going to get better now.
That's right.
So you people already set the bar high for me because I didn't know what to expect the last episode. I really did. So thank you again, and we saw some of your questions and requests, and we are going to cover those topics in the weeks to come.
Right.
We just can't jump into them right away because I like to study, and that way I can have facts and truth and not just opinion, because opinions can be wrong, opinions vary, but I think I'm a firm believer in the truth and what is
The
like
truth.
to say your truth is different than my truth, but then
They like to give alternative facts.
but then how is it truth? I mean, the word truth is narrow. Truth is narrow, unfortunately.
But I think people believe that they have studied themselves or that they are privy to knowledge that maybe you don't have. So that's why it's different forms of truth, because they believe what they've studied is to be true. Now they can study wrong, which a lot of people do study wrong, where they don't study both sides of the topic, which is
Yes.
really what it happens when it
Yes,
comes to
most
truth.
people just study to prove their point
Yes.
or to enforce their beliefs. I used to be like that. I have trained myself to look at every side. And this was a tough topic for me, not even a year ago. And I have studied about Jesus for quite a while, but I started seeing things online that I never had heard of, or had heard of but never had a desire to study, because I just didn't think it was important. And then I was just like, whoa, man, if they really came up with, my faith was shaken. And so, since we're not supposed to have a blind faith,
Right.
I did some study on my own. And once I read the whole story, because that's what you have to do, you read the whole story, you find out how deceptive some of those things online are, because a lot of people won't take the time to read the whole story. They'll
Right.
just go off of what they see online.
Because they like it.
Yeah.
It feeds into their ego.
Right.
It feeds into what they believe is important to them,
Mhm.
and validates the truth that they want to believe in instead of the truth that truly is, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Mr. Johnson here is truly, I want to say that he's very much a Bible scholar. He prides himself on, and he makes a concerted effort. Stop shaking your head.
I just like knowledge. I'm not a scholar. I just like knowledge. And
That's what a scholar is. A
No.
scholar is the person who's searching and seeking and educates themselves in knowledge and becomes an expert in that subject.
I just don't want to be deceived. That's all. And that's my primary focus. If in my study, if in any of my studies Christianity was ever found to be untrue, I'd drop it like a hot potato. I really would. Um, and I'm thankfully that none of my studies have proven that. I'm happy that my faith and my belief have been reinforced. I know uh, Christianity is a religion of faith, and you need faith to follow it. But I mean, just think how damaging it would be to your faith and just worldwide, because there's over 1 billion Christians in the world today. If Jesus never existed, or if Jesus was a copy from other myths, that would be crushing. And then I would want to know, how did they keep it going for 2,000 years? No, really. I mean, that's like
that's the biggest lie ever told, right?
Right. And
but some people feel that way about Christianity. They believe it's. I was listening to that debate we were listening to last night with the between the atheist and Frank Turek. I didn't even bother to learn his name because it was just such a futile debate, and it was basically his ego versus his opinion versus the facts that were proven. But I'm going to go back to the comment that I say, yes, faith, and God also asks us to seek wisdom. And I think that is what you do, is that you seek wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a scholarly pursuit.
Well, I don't want anyone coming back to me saying you told me the wrong thing.
Well, then that's why we tell them to go search and research for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to provide resources and information and links. But we are a resource, but by all means, we don't hold all of the answers. And we're still, again, this is our growth process. This is our learning process.
If you find something that I say incorrect, please don't wait to let me know so I can go back and research and see where I may have made an error.
Right. Okay, so give them the topic so that we can get into it.
Okay, I thought we did already. But anyway, our topic today is Jesus. The man, the myth, the legend.
The topic is, did he or does he exist? Yes. Does Jesus Christ exist? As Christians, we know. Right, we know that he exists. I'm like, what do you mean no? I'm like, we got to start this all over again. Something's not right.
KNOW.
Yeah. We know that Christ lived, died, and resurrected. So we know that as Christians. If you call yourself a Christian, you should know that.
Yes.
If you don't, then you need to find some church and some Bible scripture and some Bible study to do.
Some soul searching and some praying to do. That's all.
So we're prayerful that you find this conversation edifying and that you learn something from us, and we look forward to learning some things from you. We are going to address some of the questions that were asked about this topic. We posted a little video on Sunday asking, well, just thanking everybody for tuning in, but also letting you know that if you have questions about this topic, please feel free to share them with us. So we're going to address some of the questions that were asked, and he's going to probably do most of the talking.
No, this is our conversation. You're going to be talking right along with me.
And as we all know, some of us talk more than others, and some of us have more to say. And all right, so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let us get right into the topic.
Okay, so excuse me if you can hear the paper turning, but
we got notes.
I got notes for our conversation. So, well, let's talk about Jesus.
Okay.
Okay, well, who was Jesus? Well, it is believed by most modern historians that Jesus existed. Now, a lot of them reject the Christ portion, the supernatural parts of the story.
His birth.
But they do know and believe that there was actually a person named Jesus that started Christianity. Now,
why do you think they rejected the supernatural part?
Well, it takes faith to believe in supernatural things. You unless you've experienced something supernatural in your own personal life, you have no reason to believe it or in it, because you have no evidence. I mean, other people can give you their story, and you're going to believe one or two things. Wow, or they're crazy. I mean, at least that's me. Okay, wow, that really happened to you, or this dude is crazy. Okay, so so that's my opinion. That's not a fact. That's my opinion. Let's make that clear.
Because some of these scholars did have faith, because there were multiple deities and they did believe in miracles, just not. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get sidetracked. So go ahead.
It was a conversation, so let's hope they can expect
this is like a real conversation that we
can still pull us together. So so like I was saying, by most modern historians, he's believed to have existed. Most of them, unless they are Christian, of course, reject the Christ and supernatural portions of the story from his birth to resurrection.
Right.
Now, a lot of people will say Jesus was a Christian. No, he wasn't. He was a first century Palestinian Jew.
Right.
But he did lay the foundations of Christianity with his teachings. And all Christian really means is follower of Christ. So he kept all the Jewish festivals and dietary restrictions and temple regulations. But in his teachings, he changed some of them because he had authority to do so. And that's it for that part. He was born, they say, around the year 4, because there's records of actually the census taking place by Herod. And so since that census is mentioned in the Bible, they give it around the year 4 that he was born. And he began his earthly ministry around 30 years old and was crucified between 30 and 33 AD.
So these are the biblical facts.
But no, well, not just biblical. A lot of these things have been confirmed outside of the Bible, and that's where most of my facts are going to come from today. It's easy to defend your faith with the Bible, which is what you're supposed to do. But I think when you have some non-Christian, non-biblical facts, it just reinforces your argument. It reinforces your faith. Because if it wasn't real, why would anyone else talk about it? Why would anything from that time about it survive?
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of why I want to kind of where I'm going to be going, and then we'll see where it goes.
Right.
So I do want to answer a question while it was on my mind. Someone asked, how come there's nothing about the teenage years of Jesus in the Bible? And my response to that is, look back at your life. What were you doing that was of significance during your teenage years?
You were 16, 17.
From 13 to 19, did you do anything of significance to change the world?
Well, some people may think they have, or have.
Well, that's just in their own head, because I haven't heard about it. So, like I said, the world, not their life or someone else's life, the world. But to answer that question anyway, he was learning to be a carpenter and a good Jew. If you look in Mark chapter 6, verse 3, it says, "Is this not the carpenter?" So he had a skill, a trade, and you got to remember, back then they did not have power tools. So carpenters had to do everything. They had to cut down the trees. They had to shape the wood into planks or beams or boards, and by hand, because they didn't have power tools. And having some carpentry experience, it's not easy and it's not smooth. So you have to stop to keep sharpening your blades. That takes time. When your blades were out, you got to replace them. And sometimes they had to make their own blades if they couldn't afford to pay a metalsmith. So that's what he was doing.
So basically, we're saying Jesus was being an apprentice,
learning
a trade.
During his teenage years, yes.
Like most of us.
But there is something in Luke chapter 2, verses 41 through 50, where he was in the temple. He was 12, and he was talking to the religious teachers of the day, and they were amazed at his learning and understanding. So those are a couple uh, facts, and one could be considered an assumption about Jesus' life during his teenage years. He wasn't out there kicking it, you know. You had to walk everywhere. So unless your friend had a cart, y'all wasn't getting deep, you know. So
they wasn't kicking it on Camelback.
No, I doubt it. That's a bumpy ride. Okay, so kind of doubt it.
But I think we get so caught up in what's not in the Bible. And I think a lot of people get fixated on, well, why don't I know this and why don't I know that? Because you don't need to know.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
get sidetracked in minutia, just like we get sidetracked in minutia in our day-to-day lives. Some things you just don't need to know. Why do you feel the need? Why is it so important for you to know? Is that gonna validate the rest of the Bible for you?
I would like to know that. I mean, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Without too much sarcasm. But yeah, what does knowing what Jesus did during his teenage years, how does that help you? I mean,
but that's my question too. Does that validate for you? Does that lend more validation to Christ's existence, and does that validate the Bible for you? If you truly knew every year of someone's life, is that important in order to justify his teachings and what he did on this earth? Because to me, that's minor as compared to him dying on the cross.
Yeah.
So I want to give some perspective for people to that. Are you really caught up in having to know everything that he did as he was learning, because he was learning? So are you really caught up in that aspect and element of his life, or are you really focused on what he did as he was a complete person, a complete teacher?
I have a question for you. You read so much more than I do. Now, have you read a lot of biographies?
A few.
Okay, now just try to think in those biographies of the people that you read about. Did they put too much info about their teenage years? Unless
it was relevant.
So that's kind of why I'm wondering. I mean, maybe it was left out because it wasn't relevant. Now you have the Gnostic Gospels, which were not eyewitness accounts, and that's why they're not in the Bible. And they have stories like, oh, Jesus used to make doves out of clay and touch them and animate them, and all that kind of stuff. That's not true, because the Gnostics were a set of not Christians, but an offshoot, and they had a set of gospels, but none of them were ever eyewitnesses to Christ or appointed by apostles. So they really didn't have any firsthand experience with Jesus. They just kind of made up stories to get people to go along with what they were teaching, which is what a lot of people do. So
most people do. Yeah. That's just in everyday life. People make up stuff.
So they were running game on them. They were running their religious game, I guess. So
they was the original hustlers of the church.
Hey, they say we got them now. Had to start somewhere.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, everybody. So the next thing is, I think this is so important, and the wine deals with a lot on Facebook, Instagram. He is truly a defender of the faith, and I think a lot of times he gets just these outrageous. And I think this mainly comes from the Hebrew Israelites. I'm just going to be very blunt. I think a lot of this comes from the Hebrew Israelites, and a lot of it comes from people who just believe in the Egyptian mythos of Horus and Osiris, and then other people of different faiths like the Hare Krishna, and people who believe in reincarnation and all that kind of stuff. So we wanted to talk about dispelling some of these myths that revolve around the birth of Christ, the death of Christ, and that's just to say people have misinterpreted the history of the mythology of these people. So, honey, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay, well, some of the myths I'm going to try to dispel, or Horus and Krishna, and
it's another one, right?
Huh?
It's another one
no,
too.
just those two for now.
Okay.
So, and if anybody asks, I'll research. I don't mind learning more. Okay, but let's start with Horus, because a lot of people in our community are telling us to go back to Kemet, which is another name for Egypt, and these were our gods before the white man took us, and all that kind of stuff. Well, not every black person in America can trace their lineage back to Egypt. I did an ancestry DNA test. All of mine was from West Africa. Not all of it, but 75% of it. Okay, but anyway.
He's my. This is my African king.
No,
you are.
No,
he is.
Semi, whatever. Okay. So Horus. Let's start with Horus. Horus was the Egyptian god of the sun, and a lot of people like to say he had 12 followers like Christ. If you read the actual stories, he did not. They say his birth was on December 25th. That has to do with the winter solstice, and they said the sun in Egypt looked like it was being reborn. So that's why they're saying that is similar to Christ. So SUNSON. So people like to that's a link. So
everything is a link.
Right. So and then they like to say Horus was born of a virgin. Clearly he was not. If you read the Egyptian myth,
was not born of a virgin.
So the Egyptian myth goes, this is just a paraphrase, but his father Osiris was killed by his brother Set, cut up into pieces, and his wife Isis, so she was already married. First thing you did in those cultures when you got married was consummate the marriage. So pretty sure, unless it was on their wedding day, when he kidnapped him and cut him up, and nothing I've ever read said that, they consummated that marriage and she was not a virgin. But so Osiris was cut up. Isis goes and finds all the pieces of the body. And the reason I'm smiling because I don't know if this is the right way to say this.
What's the only way to say it?
Okay, she couldn't find his penis. So she had to make a magic one. She made a magic penis.
Oh my goodness.
And attached it to his body. And that's how Horus was conceived. So it was not a
virgin
birth anywhere close to the virgin birth in Christianity.
And how realistic is that? Is that what you really want to believe? I mean, if it is, then by all means, go for what you know. But that's just a little too crazy. But we'll put a link down below so that you can read the story for yourself, so you're not left to other people's interpretation of Osiris and Horus and Isis. I mean, because Egyptian mythology is very interesting and very intriguing, along with Greek mythology, Zeus, along with Nordic mythology with Thor. I mean, it's entertaining, it's interesting, and about deities that are superhuman. But there's only one true story about Christ and about God. So let's be realistic, people.
And and a lot of people like to compare the Ankh to the cross, and they really don't have any similarity other than shape. Ankh means life or breath of life, and the cross, let's face it, until Jesus was on it, was nothing but a symbol of death, torture, and misery. Okay, I mean,
it is a symbol of remembrance of what God does.
It became one, but its original purpose was strictly for death, and it was a long and slow one at that, because of how it was done. You get nailed through both your hands and your feet, and you get stood upright, and your weight will drop down on your legs. And so that will collapse your rib cage on your lungs, so you couldn't breathe. So you would have to push on your feet on the spike to lift your chest up to take a breath. So that was a slow death by suffocation and pain. And then the Romans, you know, oh, you were taking too long to die. They would come along with a hammer and break your legs.
So you couldn't lift
So
yourself
you couldn't
up
push yourself
to
up
take a breath.
to take a breath. So the cross is just a symbol of torture, and that's it. Before Christ was crucified upon one.
And
So-
babe, before you go into the Krishna example, I just want to say that I think we both are respectful of African history
Oh yeah.
and the lineage that we come from, because you know we do understand that that is the cradle of civilization. That is where we all
Yes.
come from.
Yes.
But I think we also have to understand that there is a mythology behind every race and every ethnicity, no matter what it is. There's a mythology behind it, and there's also a respect for our culture and our history and our real kings and queens of Africa. Uh-oh. What happened? Okay, the computer did something weird.
Okay.
But just I wanted to make sure that we put that out there, that we do respect our history and our
Yes.
culture and where we come from and what we've been through. But we're not going to do ancestor worship and pretend that the Horus is by any means a deity to be worshipped and honored and respected.
Yeah, I can't do ancestor worship. I'm mad at mine because you know the ancestors that were dead, they didn't tell the ancestors that were alive that the white man was coming. You know, so you get no worship from me. You know, you could have told this
Like
ancestor
they
to
sold me out.
hide in the bush, don't go to the beach that day. You could have did something. So
But
I
then,
can't.
honey, we wouldn't be here to share all this.
Oh, okay. Well, still, okay. All right, still, you know, maybe I like to be home though. You know,
Home in the motherland.
that's right.
Okay.
So yeah, you know, they could have stay away from them people that's on the boat. They could have did
Stay away
something.
from them people on the
They
boat.
could have did something, you know. So.
All right. Krishna.
Okay, Krishna. Now, a lot of people want to say that there is a link between Krishna and Jesus' life and crucifixion, but there's no link in any Hindu mythology about Krishna being a savior. I want to say that about Horus either. There's no link. Now, Egyptology and Hare Krishna and Hinduism do both believe in reincarnation.
Yeah.
So the resurrection and reincarnation can seem similar, but anything can seem similar if you ignore the differences.
Say it again.
Okay? Anything can seem similar if you ignore the differences.
Right.
And the differences in the stories are so huge that they greatly outweigh the similarities. Like people will say Krishna was pierced like Christ was. Krishna was pierced by an arrow in a hunting accident, got shot in the foot. And it doesn't really say if he died, but it says he was comforted and ascended to meet the gods. Now, the Gospels say that Christ definitely died, and he was in a tomb for 3 days. And a lot of people want to use what they call the swoon theory, that Christ fell into a comatose state from the pain of the beating and the pain of the crucifixion. But if you read the Gospels, it says a Roman soldier pierced his side with a spear and water gushed out to verify if he was dead. Well, you have a sac of water around your heart. It's called a pericardium. And so it allows your heart to function properly, and you know you need your heart beating to pump oxygen throughout your body. So he was definitely dead. So that's why his body was able to be wrapped in grave clothes, and he was placed in a tomb. So that's a huge difference between the resurrection of Krishna and Christ. And I also want to say something about karma. People like to use karma nowadays as what you do now will come back upon you. That is not what karma means. What karma actually means is however you are is determines your station in the next life. Karma is a Hindu term, and it has to do with reincarnation. So if your karma is good, you will be reincarnated as something better. So you could be reincarnated as a rich person or just a person that lives a healthy life. If your karma was good this life, if your karma was bad, you could be reincarnated as a dog or a bug or something like that. So that's how that is the original teaching of karma. It has to do with what you will be reincarnated as in your next life. So a lot of people, I think, are taking the scripture, you reap what you sow, and applying that to karma, even though the two are at opposite ends of the spectrum.
I think it's better if we just begin to continue to say, you reap what you sow. So, instead of
what's dark comes to light.
Right. And those are more accurate. And I've been guilty of saying, oh, that's karma. Like, that's not really what karma is. Okay. So we hope that's a little bit enlightening.
So if you want to drop any more comparisons between Jesus and any other gods in mythology, let me know. I'll definitely study and read the whole story.
And I think that's important. Read the whole story before you question it, though. Before you present it as fact, because that's where people get stuck with him at, is that they'll bring up these stories and then he's gonna read to make sure what you're saying to find out if it's factual or not. I'm gonna read to see if what you're saying is factual or not. So it's best that you read the entire story instead of what you heard a speaker say, because we'll get caught up in the YouTube live too. You'll like, oh, I watched this video by Professor such and such. He traveled to Egypt and he's an expert in Egyptology and he has no degree. He just likes to go to Egypt a lot and look at the artwork.
Well, and I don't have a degree either, so
No, but you don't claim to be the expert either.
No.
All you do is read and study. And that's what we all need to learn how to do, is to read and study so that we can speak from knowledge and not from our opinionated thought. Because our opinionated thought always sounds wonderful.
Oh, yeah. To us.
Yeah.
I do want to say something since you managed to read, mention the reading. How is it that most of the people, in my experience, that criticize the Bible have never read it? I mean, what else did you do that in your life about? I mean, I can't think of anything that I've never experienced that I would criticize other than that looks crazy or I wouldn't do it. I've never bungee jumped, but and people that do it look crazy to me, and I know I would never do it, but I can't critique it. I don't know the thrill that you get from looking at your face almost flat to the ground and bouncing back up to go back down again. I mean, so I can't really criticize it.
Right.
But how do people, I mean, maybe one of you guys out there can explain that to me, how people feel validated in being able to criticize a book that they've never read. I mean,
or that they've read pieces of.
Yeah, I mean, do you do that to War and Peace? Do you do that to any of Shakespeare's works? Do you do that to the Quran, another religious book? Do you do that to the Torah? So I don't understand why people, that may have been going to church their whole life and turned away from Christianity, but have never read the Bible from cover to cover to get at least a basic understanding of it. Most of those people just pick verses to criticize because, that fits my agenda. But you don't know what the rest of the book says about what you just read. So I'm just wondering how people can do that and think and feel that it's okay. People want this goody lovey-dovey God, but
they want the warm and fuzzy.
But that's not the God of the Bible. Jesus wasn't no punk. And people like to think that he was because he loves us and he loves you, and So
we should get a T-shirt. Jesus wasn't no punk.
I think I just might. But
stay tuned for that.
So and it's gonna say wasn't just like that. Wasn't no punk.
That is not a word.
It is for me. Okay. So.
Okay, everybody. So we got. We're not sidetracked. We're staying on course. So, yes. Did Jesus exist? And prove it.
So the answer to that is yes. I'm going to give you some historical references that you can look up yourself. And I'm also going to give you maybe some things to think about from Scripture. I think I'm going to give the Scripture validations first. If you read in the Gospels, it talks about Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And in all four Gospels, the first people to see Christ resurrected were women. Now, in first century Judea, a woman's testimony was not even valid in court. So why would Jesus appear to women who would go tell people that he had risen when the culture of the day was pretty much that a woman's word was untrustworthy? Mm-hmm. So to all you feminists out there that say, oh God, Jesus hates the women, okay, that should give you an example, obviously, that he doesn't. And also, if you were making this up, why would you want to be one of the guys to say the women saw him first? Usually, I'm just looking at myself. If I was writing a story, I'm not looking like a punk in the story. It says these men were huddled up in a room while the women went to the tomb to go check on Jesus. That's like sending my wife to confront a burglar. Okay, oh baby, no. Could you go? Here's the gun. Okay, so would you really want to write a story where you look like a coward? And think about that. That's what they did. So would you want that fact to get out there? So that lends a little bit of credibility to the Gospels.
I think so.
So let's get to some of the historians, and most of them are non-Christian. They are either Jewish or Roman. They are pre-Council of Nicaea to show people that Christianity was around for a long time before the Council of Nicaea, and that Jesus was already worshipped as a deity before the Council of Nicaea. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, for those of you who do not know what the Council of Nicaea is, we'll have a resource link below, and it's also going to be above, just a brief description. But I encourage you to find out what the Council of Nicaea is if you do not know what it is, so that you kind of can put all of this into context.
So I'm going to give a brief overview of the Council of Nicaea. There was a debate in Christianity about the essence of Jesus. There was a man named Arius who taught that Jesus was a created being. And that is where the Jehovah's Witnesses get their doctrine from, and denominations along that line, that Jesus was a created being, whether he was transformed from the Archangel Michael or he did not exist with God before time. That's where they get their belief from a man named Arius, and that was around 290 AD when he first started that belief. And the other camp, you have, I want to say it was, I'm sorry, I'm not positive. I got so many names. I want to say it was.
He's got notes just to make sure he's on point for everybody.
I think it was, I want to say it was Celis. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't Celis. I think it was
We'll put the name in the
Athanasius of Alexandria. He was
Athanasius.
he was an African church father. He was Egyptian. Yeah, he was of the camp that Christ existed before time. He was of the same substance as God, and otherwise he couldn't remove sin. It takes God to be able to remove sin, not a created being. If Jesus was a if he was a created being, why couldn't God just use an angel? Why did he have to transform him into Jesus?
Right.
You know, if he could have used just any old created being. So Arius was of the camp that Jesus was a created being. Athanasius of Alexandria was not. And so the Council of Nicaea sided with Athanasius. So that's just a brief overview, but she'll give you a link where you can read this whole long synopsis about it. So, but back to the historians. Now, most people have heard of Josephus.
Right.
He was a Jewish historian. He was born in 37 AD, lived to 100 AD. He wrote in his book Antiquities of the Jews around 93, 94 AD. In book 20, chapter 9, he wrote Jesus, who was called Christ. A lot of Hebrew Israelites like to disrepute him, saying, "Oh, he was a co-conspirator of the Romans, so his writing isn't valid." But that's why I have more. Tacitus, he was a Roman governor, and he wrote a book called Annals in 116 AD, and so he referred to Christus, who was crucified under Pontius Pilate, who was the prefect in Judea from 26 to 36 AD. So that's why they kind of get that date between 30 and 33 AD also for Christ's crucifixion. He also wrote about Nero blaming Christians blaming a fire that destroyed part of Rome on Christians. And that was in AD 64. And Tacitus lived from like 55 to 120. The Babylonian Talmud, which was compiled between 70 and 500 AD, and they mentioned Yeshu being hanged on a tree, and the evening before Passover. So but they try to paint Christ in a positive light, a negative light, saying that he wasn't the Messiah and all that other kind of stuff. But they still write of him existing. Pliny the Younger, he was a Roman governor. He wrote in 112 AD, and he wrote about Christians. He said they meet on a certain day before dawn. They sing to Christ as if singing to a god, and they pledge to not to do any wicked deeds. You know, and he lived from 61 to 113 AD. You have Thales, who was quoted by Julius Africanus in 221 AD in this book called Chronology. They write about the earthquake and the eclipse that happened on the day of Jesus' crucifixion. And Thales wrote this in the early 50s, so like 52 AD to 55 AD. There are no existing original records of Thales' writing. So I'm not just telling you the good stuff. I gotta tell you the negative stuff too. So then you have a Syrian. His name was Mara Bar Serapion. He wrote a letter in 73 to his son, talking about the Greeks and the Athenians. He says, "What benefit did the Athenians obtain by putting Socrates to death? And he said after Socrates was killed, famine and plague came to Athens. The Greeks were burning Pythagoras. One moment their country was covered in sand. So he's talking about the eruption of Vesuvius. Then we have where he wrote about the Jews by murdering their wise king, their kingdom abolished. So he's probably talking about the temple destruction by the Romans. And God avenged these men. The wise king, Christ, lived on in the teachings he enacted.
So how many resources already? How many historians have you just read off so far?
So far, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So how many do you have on?
I got
He's got a lot.
I got 5 more.
Do you have to read off all?
No, I don't. But I mean, some people like information.
Well, we're gonna provide the information and link.
Okay.
I'm trying to stop us from being 2 hours long.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, but I think it's important. I mean, because a lot of times the debates that you're having are people saying, prove it. What other historians speak about Christ, speak about his existence. And clearly, there are plenty of writings and plenty of, what do I want to say? Plenty of historians and historical evidence and documents that prove that Christ did walk this earth, that he died. I mean, they're proving not only, did he walk the earth, but that he actually died and how he died and who killed him. And I just think that's important. It's important for us to understand.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, we've proven that the Jesus of the Bible existed. Let's look at the supernatural for a second. And I have a question to ask you. Would you and the viewers, would you die for a lie? Would you willingly die for something you knew was a lie? Okay, let's take that into context. You have these 11 cowards in a room that send the women out to go look to see about the body of their Lord and the man that they just spent the last 3 years learning from. Okay, so you have these 11 cowards up in the room, and most of them died horrible deaths, and all they had to do was say that Christianity was false, we made it up, but they were willing to die for it because they knew it to be true. They saw this stuff with their own eyes. Yes, we don't have the originals, but there are over 6,000 fragments or copies of the Bible that exist, and the modern translations that we have match up extremely accurately with those ancient fragments. And the originals were created within 1 to 2 generations of the resurrection. So, and it's written like eyewitness testimony. But if it could have been proven to be false back then, why is it still around?
Yeah. Everything else has died out.
Right.
Just about.
I mean,
there's some stuff that's still there are some things that predate Christianity.
Right.
I mean, Judaism.
Yeah. Right. but Christianity is a branch of that.
Yes. Right.
And that has been proven to be true. There's a lot of historical and archaeological evidence that supports Judaism and Christianity.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Judaism is true.
There's none that supports the other religions. Even though there's Jews that choose not to believe that he said who he was. And I do have one more thing to say. If the fact that the historians most of them that I named were white, and you can't believe them because they were white, that's just a racial bias that you have to overcome.
Yeah.
Color wasn't an issue back then. It was more nationality.
Right. And these people were of different nationalities.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned that Egyptian, Syrian, Jewish, Roman. So, but I saw in a video, and one time a guy posted, I can't believe them, and he posted a picture of a white guy, and I was just like, Well, how many other things do you believe from white people that they
Right.
tell you? I mean, they tell you need oxygen in your body. Did you
Right.
stop breathing?
Like, can't breathe. White person told me I needed the air
Right.
to breathe. Like, get over yourself. Are you
So,
serious? Yeah, that
hate can blind you to a lot of things. That's kind of what I'm trying to say.
don't let hate block your salvation. That's what you shouldn't do. That's a detriment to you and your lineage and to your children. If that's what you're espousing on a consistent basis.
Right. And I'll say it again, like I said last video, I'm a better person because of Christianity. Even if it was somehow, some way proven to be false, ooh, I could go back to all the stuff I used to do.
Okay, so
but like I said, I'm a better person because of it. So and some of it I wouldn't want to go back to now anyway. So
he got me.
yes. Yes.
So I think that's it. Is that it?
I do believe so.
Thank you for.
And I hope you people enjoy this. I hope you have enough patience to watch the whole
video
thing, because this was longer than the last one. So we will try to keep them 60 minutes and under.
Yes.
So, and I know.
Well, we're under 60 minutes.
Yeah.
But we're pushing that hour mark. But like you all requested, we are gonna go live. That won't be until October. But that's definitely in the works. We're just gonna work on a better camera setup and lighting situation. So we appreciate you kind of powering through this with us and allowing us to learn with you and grow. And we're just excited to be doing this and encouraged that you all have been watching and give us such great feedback and give us some great conversations. I want to thank Fatal Pros and Gino and everybody else who is just been very encouraging and giving us a lot of feedback. We're going to actually invite some of y'all on the show.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, yes.
So that you can be part of the conversation too,
right.
Because this is truly something I think that is needed.
Oh yeah.
And we just appreciate you watching.
Yeah.
So right. I'm Tia Marche.
And I'm Lawan Johnson.
Thank you so much for watching our conversation.
Be
blessed.
Be blessed. Have a good week.
Bye.